A lot of people consider Mass Effect 2 to be the best game in the trilogy, and for good reason. It took everything from the first game and made it cooler, faster, sleeker. Combat is massively improved, your inventory is streamlined, and the Mako is history. Mass Effect 2 manages to tell an entirely new story while still making constant callbacks to the elements of the first game, and as a second part of a trilogy, it still feels like a complete, self-contained game while also contributing to the larger story. The only thing people really complain about in this game is the fairly tedious method of scanning planets to gather resources, but playing it now with an imported save file and all the DLC, the game gives you so many resources that you barely need to scan anything, so it's not really an issue anymore. The second game also introduces a few things that kind of became bad habits in the third game. I should probably warn you now, I know I said this was going to be a video about the sequels, but yeah, it's mostly about Mass Effect 3. And you can't talk about Mass Effect 3 without talking about the ending. It's the biggest reason for the huge ratings discrepancy between critics and users, and if you've already heard this on a billion comment threads or you just don't want to have the very ending spoiled, feel free to skip ahead to the time on the screen. Otherwise, here's a quick overview of why so many of us hate the ending. Mass Effect spends 3 games building up the Reapers as a threat. Their sole purpose is to harvest sufficiently advanced organic life, and though they're mechanical, they're practically a force of nature, unfeeling and unstoppable. In the first 2 games, we kill a Reaper and stop the Collectors, which are essentially their forward ground units, but it's always made clear that all we've done so far is delay the inevitable. When Mass Effect 3 starts, there's no more stalling. The Reapers are here. And for a third time, we're shown what they're capable of. We see their power, and again we see the effects of indoctrination. The Reapers have led a group called Cerberus to believe that the Reapers can be controlled, used as tools to ultimately let humanity shape the galaxy to their will. Shepard knows that they're wrong, and our primary goal is to build the Crucible, a weapon capable of destroying the Reapers, while Cerberus tries to interfere with us at every opportunity. But in the end, of course, we succeed. Humanity makes its last stand, and Shepard, barely able to walk, let alone fight, makes it to the Crucible. The end is near. This should be the moment we've been waiting for, but instead what we get is this.
I control the Reapers. They are my solution.
We're given a choice that basically boils down to what cutscenes we want to see at the end. Destroy the Reapers, but at the cost of all synthetic life, including the friends you may have made along the way. Control the Reapers, which apparently really is possible despite what we believed earlier. Or synthesize a new type of life, combining organics and synthetics and forcing an end to the conflict. If it was only a case of choose your ending cutscene, it might not be that bad. Lots of games end this way. It's never very satisfying, but we understand as gamers that no matter how many choices we can make in a game, there's probably only a few different ways it can end. The problem is that we've spent 3 games with the goal of destroying the Reapers, and now, at the 11th hour, the game wants us to do something else. Destroying the Reapers, like we've been told to do all along, has a caveat. All synthetic life will be destroyed, even the synthetic allies we've made along the way. This would be a really interesting dilemma if it had been presented earlier in the game. How much are you willing to give up to end the Reapers? Instead, it's practically a punishment. Sure, you can destroy the Reapers like you've been told to do all along, but...
Crucible will not discriminate. All synthetics will be targeted.
Then there's the control option, and again, we've spent time being shown that the only person deluded enough to believe that the Reapers could be controlled was being indoctrinated. Now we're told that, yeah, he was indoctrinated, but you could totally control them. No, you're definitely not being manipulated. Trust the hologram that you just met 20 seconds ago. And then there's the alternative, synthesis. Rebuild all life in the galaxy into a new form, and everyone can live happily ever after. Never mind that it's never even been hinted at that this could be an option. Never mind that there's no way to know what the actual consequence of doing this would be. Just believe the nice hologram when it presents this as the best alternative. If any of these choices had been presented before the very end of the game, it wouldn't be so bad. It would have created an interesting tension between the characters who knew there were alternatives to destroying the Reapers, and it would have presented us as players with an interesting choice to think about. Instead, we're just blindsided with them at the end of the game. We think we're about to achieve the goal we spent 3 games working towards, and instead, at the biggest moment in the game, the spotlight is stolen by some hologram. It's insulting, it's unsatisfying, and it's just bad writing.
So be it.
The first time I played Mass Effect 3, I was already thinking about my next playthrough. I wondered what would be different if I'd made different choices, and I was excited at the thought of starting back again at the first game and playing through the whole trilogy. And then I got to the ending. I felt deflated. This is what everything had been leading towards. Sure, I had liked the game until then, but what was the point of starting over when I knew that this was all that was waiting for me at the end? I played through the first 2 games twice before playing the third game, but I never replayed any of them afterwards. Until this year anyway. With Andromeda on the horizon, I wanted to play through the trilogy one more time, and the truth is, I've softened on Mass Effect 3 over time. Some of the things that bothered me before weren't so bad now, and some of them weren't exclusive to the third game. The annoying quests you pick up from random conversations you overhear while walking around started in the second game, not the third game. And Mass Effect 2 was the game that introduced character DLC with 2 purchasable squad mates, although Mass Effect 3 was the game that took it a step further and locked a character who was fairly important to the story behind a paywall. Playing through Mass Effect 3 again also made something clear to me. The ending itself wasn't the problem, it was a symptom of a larger issue. In a lot of ways, Mass Effect 3 shined as the final chapter of the trilogy. Combat was further refined, weapon modification returned without the inventory clutter of the first game, and we got to see our squad members from both games spending more time interacting with each other and feeling more like real people than they had across really either of the other games. The real issue in Mass Effect 3 was player agency. This game was so determined to tell a particular story that at times it forgot that it was a game and it didn't let the player get there themselves. In the first Mass Effect, you're forced to make a choice between Kaidan and Ashley. You can't avoid it. Every time you play the game, somebody will die. But it's a choice that makes sense in the moment. You have to choose between defending a bomb or backing up an assault team. There are too many enemies to take on and not enough time. The death fits into the narrative and it comes across as a hard choice instead of a cheap trick to kill off a character. In Mass Effect 2, it's possible for a lot of your squad to die in the game's final mission. But before you get there, you're given ample warning. This is a mission you might not come back from, and you need to be as prepared as possible through beefing up your ship's defenses and earning the trust of your squad mates. If someone dies in the mission, it's because you neglected an upgrade or chose somebody for a job they weren't right for. It's a consequence of the decisions you make, not a decision the game makes for you. Choice and consequence. Meanwhile, in Mass Effect 3, Thane's death comes from an attack from Kai Lang, and we'll get to him in a minute, while Shepard just stands there and watches. And Morden's death, while it is a fantastic scene with one of the most memorable lines in the entire game,
someone else might have gotten it wrong.
Happens while Shepard stands there and watches him go. A lot of defenders of Mass Effect 3's ending assume that people don't like it because Shepard dies, or that the critics of the game just wanted a happy ending. That's not the case at all. The stakes are higher than ever before in the third game, and we know the danger. But these deaths don't come from choice or consequence, even though we're right there as they happen. The game needs them to die, and so they do. Instead of letting us try to save them and fail, or giving us a choice to prevent their deaths at the expense of another consequence, the game takes away the controller until it's had time to tell the story it wants to tell. And it's not just the character deaths. The game tries to force us to be invested in certain characters without earning it. It happens specifically with two different characters, and the only times I truly didn't enjoy playing the game were while they were on screen. The first is this child who dies at the beginning of the game when his shuttle is shut down. Shepard gets hung up on his death, and by extent, we should too. The game does this by forcing us to sit through slow, boring interludes where we chase him through the afterlife or something. You hear the voices of other people who have died, which is a nice touch, but these scenes aren't fun to play, and they don't help the player feel connected to Shepard. It just feels like they're constantly trying to remind us that we're supposed to feel sad about this kid we saw for 10 seconds at the beginning of the game when Shepard has seen a ton of death in their career. It's also the shape taken on by the hologram at the end of the game for some reason that's never fully explained, which really makes me trust it even less. The second is Kai Lang. I'll never stop hating Kai Lang. He's the worst character in Mass Effect, and I will never be convinced that he wasn't created because somebody's DeviantArt page got mixed up with the actual concept art. But even if he wasn't such a lame villain, the problem is with the way he's introduced. We meet him late in the game and he's presented as an equal to Shepard, a badass who cuts down anything in his way. Only we've never heard of this guy before. In 2.5 games, no mention at all of Cerberus' supposed best assassin. And when he finally does show up, he runs off again as quickly as he arrived. Anderson warns us,
Lang is a vicious bastard. Don't underestimate him.
Then that's it. We just take it at his word because the game never shows us Kai Lang doing anything to earn his reputation. Every time we meet him, there's some plot convenience and he escapes. He never feels like a foil to Shepard or a satisfying villain. To bring up the other games again, in the first game we had to chase down Saren. We spend a lot of the game always one step behind him, but we see what he's doing because of what he leaves behind, and we inch closer and closer to him before we finally get to take him down. The game ends with an epic showdown with a Reaper, and even though we technically don't even participate in it, it's still really satisfying because we achieved the thing we were trying to do for the whole game. In the second game, although it does feel like we could have told off the elusive man a long time ago, it's still satisfying to finally stick it to him after we've spent the entire game at odds with somebody who claimed to be our ally while manipulating us at every opportunity. The actual final boss of the game is honestly not that fun or interesting, but again, executing the mission you've spent the whole game preparing for still made it a really satisfying ending. The only thing I felt when defeating Kai Lang was gratitude that I wouldn't have to see him anymore. Mass Effect 3 already has a mission you've spent the entire game gearing up for: destroying the Reapers. The game introduces Kai Lang in the third act and expects us to treat him as a rival, but he's a plot device, nothing more, and certainly not an equal to Shepard. I know I just spent a lot of time being negative about Mass Effect 3, but outside of a few terrible scenes, I really did enjoy going back through the entire trilogy, even knowing how things would end. As fans, it's only because we love the series so much that we were so critical of it for not ending on a high note. Mass Effect gave us a sprawling galaxy and unforgettable characters, and playing through the games again has me beyond hyped to discover the new world of Andromeda. Seriously, the game's sitting right in front of me and I'm just waiting to finish this video so that I can go play it. I know that some of the early reviews have been mixed so far, and I think that just goes to show how much this franchise means to its fans. If the new game can't hold up to the original trilogy, I'm sure I'll be just as critical of its flaws, but if it's anything like Mass Effect 3, then despite the flaws, I think I'll still be pretty glad I took the trip.